So today what we're going to do is to review Sefer Kohelet. We learned it parak by parak, so by now we should be completely wise, able to make any life decision with absolute assurance, and to never be fooled by life's ups and downs. So all of you should be going like this, okay. But at least we'll know what we're up against, and we'll have some tools to help us get past all of what we need to get past in life. So the way we're going to do this review is I'm going to give you a few representative psukim from each of the prakim. There's obviously not, we don't have the time to review the entire Sefer pasuk by pasuk. And I also have a fear that if we would, it would get lost again, if you know what I mean. So it's easier in some ways, if you want to retain what we learned and actually use it, to have something to hold on to. So the first parak begins with the words Divrei Kohelet. So as Rashi points out, we're not necessarily going to like what we hear in Sefer Kohelet. It's tochacha. Nobody likes tochacha. People always say, I want to know the truth, but people don't like seeing it, in their face. What don't we like about this? What we don't like about this is that we enjoy the fantasies that life provides because they're delightful and they're engaging. But in fact, they're not of real endurance, and they don't take us where we want to go. So in many ways, the main message of the first parak is Hevel Havalim Amar Kohelet, Hevel Havalim HaKol Hevel. We have the 7 repetitions of the word Hevel, which means both air and vanity. So what he's saying is that the 7 days of creation, each one of them are passing in terms of the impression of time itself. Their entire value is what we make of them. We also at the time spoke about 7 periods in a person's life. Again, the time is there, but what you make of it is up to you. So you could have a life that's hevel, which means also air, or ruach, which means spirit. So the main message, as I said in the first parak, is to know that we don't necessarily like hearing that. We don't like our dreams to explode in our faces. But the advantage of it, of saying Hevel, Havalim, HaKol Hevel, is that it opens the path to Ruach, to living lives of value, in which we have something left at the end of the show. In the second parak, one of the most interesting psukim is L'schok amarti moholel, v'lesimcha maza oseh. So he says, I said, what good is laughter? It's only frivolity. And what does joy achieve? So it seems to be a strange pasuk. Isn't what we want happiness? So at this point, we discussed happiness as a means or happiness as an ends. So going back to what we said about Hevel and Ruach, if laughter and expressions of joy are an end in and of themselves, life would be very different than living a life in which there's so much meaning and depth and purpose, that the laughter and the joy comes as a byproduct of life. So he's saying, acting out joy, acting out frivolity, acting out laughter, just gives you a moment in which you could escape from yourself. But living a life that's productive, in which there are authentic achievements, in which there's real connection, so the laughter and the joy at that point are a byproduct. So when you look at almost any heroic story, a person's whose life we would like to say, I would like a life like that. So they were people of joy, or zaru ala tzaddik. Tzaddikim have real joy within them, but their joy is a consequence of their choices. It's not a lifestyle. So to understand this more, if you can imagine getting a terrible sentence from a court. Are you ready? 8 years of watching Bugs Bunny, cartoon after cartoon after cartoon. That would be horrific. So the reason why it would be horrific is because it's not what we want, even though no doubt there was a certain time period in which that was all we wanted. So from there, we have to avoid making a mistake that many people make when they hear Kohelet. You could think that its author, Shlomo, doesn't want us to be happy, just earnest and serious. No, he wants us to be happy. What he doesn't want is for us to grasp on to tinsel and think it's gold. Taking this idea further, Okay, if we move on from Perek Bet to Perek Gimel, what he says is the way to live a productive life is to make the most of what life offers moment by moment. So here I'm going to stop for a little while and take us through again the different times and what could be done in those times. So he begins by telling us for every time and for every moment and from everything under the sun, there's a place, there's a moment when it's important. So there's a time for birth, there's a time for death. So this would mean that there's a time, as we said at the time, there's a time in which we should build ourselves, and there's a time in which things have to be destroyed, things have to be planted, and things have to be uprooted. So we spoke about what times these were. Okay, so on a simple level, that would mean time to give birth is after 9 months. Time to die is when your lifespan is finished. But we also spoke about this, that every person who's born has a purpose, and their lifetime has to mesh with the times in which Hashem put them. So there's a time to be born. There's a time when all of your characteristics and traits